Despite utilizing birth control, I unintentionally became pregnant a few years ago with my ex-partner. He desired for me to be fired, but I believed that we ought to continue. After we had a lengthy argument, he told me it had nothing to do with the baby and that it would end if I kept it. This wounded me, but I had to accept it because I can't really make him do anything. Therefore, if that's how he feels, I advised him to sign away his paternal rights. He consented, and he signed away his rights when I gave birth to my little child. It was a little difficult to raise her, but having my parents there was really helpful. She is 5 years old now, and things are going really well. She even refers to my 4-year-old boyfriend as Dad. My ex-partner feels that his parents are pressuring him to have kids, even though he doesn't want to. He therefore disclosed to them the existence of my daughter. He keeps attempting to message me to persuade me to allow them to see her, so I know this. He has even once shown up at my house with him. When I told him that he was inside his rights and had no claim to her, as well as the fact that none of the three of them are connected to her legally, he threatened to sue me. I laughed and slammed the door in his face. She's just their biological granddaughter, so I do feel a little bad for his parents, but it also didn't have the right to exploit my daughter to attempt to satisfy their want for a grandchild. If I could just keep him away, is it wrong of me to keep them away? I'm simply concerned that she wouldn't understand this and that they would eventually try to establish a fatherly tie between her and my ex. Next, the most popular comments: they are currently not at home inside his rights. Your daughter no longer has grandparents, and you owe them nothing. You are not obligated to maintain the child-grandparent relationship, but you would be perfectly justified in doing so if you shared a close personal bond with them apart from the one you have with your sperm donor. Allow them to bring you before the judge so he may be laughed at again. To be clear, this is not legal advice, rather, it's a judgment on how much of a hole you would be to refuse grandparents access to the child. It's one thing if a judge orders you to allow them to interact. That is not the subject of this ruling. It is not your place to assume how things will operate in the jurisdiction of OPI. The only attorney who practices family law in the area where OPI lives is qualified to make such a claim. Yes, grandparents have rights and can have visits in some places, like mine. To the best of my knowledge, grandparents who wish to potentially be granted grandparents' rights must demonstrate that they had some kind of pre-existing relationship before being refused access to the child. They would have no legal basis to defend themselves since their son signed away his parental rights and kept them in the dark about the child's existence until recently. Not at their house. Do not communicate with these individuals at all because they unexpectedly showed up to your house, invited him despite your refusal to accept him at his parents' axes, and threatened to sue you. They don't respect you at all, nor your boundaries. Get legal advice on this and factor in the amount of child support your ex-spouse would have to return if he decided to take the matter to court, just to be safe. And he would have a tandy. Yes, that particular aspect was incorrect, but she must consider her daughter. She is denying her child the opportunity to learn about potential wonderful grandparents. She won't let them meet her, which infuriated them. If I were this child, I would break off communication with my mother as soon as I realized this when I was older. Not nice. You can express your feelings about their son to your grandparents, who are typically wonderful people. You know you have every right to break things off with them if they don't agree, because they'll want to include him in her life by inviting him to events. It does not follow that they should not be included in your daughter's life just because their son refuses to interact with her. Should it be solely them, they demonstrate that they will not make suitable grandparents. She isn't taking anything away from her daughter. After years of not speaking, they invited themselves to her home, hoping to meet a stranger so they could act like grandparents to her daughter. I don't understand how you can think those individuals are good. Here's the following tale: telling the man who raised me that he is no longer my dad. Am I the a-hole for doing this? My parents divorced as a result of the affair I was born into, which we discovered when I was 14. My entire life was lost upon their divorce. My mother was a complete wreck. John, the man who reared me, grew aloof, and I was in disbelief, realizing that all I had ever known had been based on lies. John forced me to move in with my mother since he didn't want to talk to me anymore and didn't fight for custody. I was with him even though he didn't say anything to me at all, he just watched me sob in bed. He didn't want me there, even though I detested my mother and begged him to let me stay. Because my birth certificate bore his name, he had to pay child support, but that was all. Along with his disappearance from my life, I also lost my family's side. Among my mom's relatives were my aunts, uncles, grandparents, and cousins. I had grown up with a smaller family. Despite his intense anger towards my mother, she supported me. Since she was the only kid I had, I was forgiven for my outbursts and bad behavior. Although I am aware of how terrible what she did to John was, my mother loves me, so I can't say the same about John, and I needed support. I made a sincere effort to contact him. I attempted to meet with him and give him calls. His parents didn't even want to see me, and he went away after seeing the old house. He didn't reply. I was in severe financial distress and felt terrible about it. I need extensive therapy to regain my equilibrium and develop good coping strategies. He's been attempting to get in touch with me for the past 6 years. I went to see him because, despite the fact that he had ghosted me, I still had good memories of him. He appeared content after getting married once more. When I called him by name, he stated I didn't enjoy it and that it made him feel very uneasy because he thought of me as his daughter. He lost it, was furious, and admitted that he had messed up and that he wanted to make up when I informed him that I no longer saw him as my father. He became even more irate when I told him that I had already grown up and didn't really need him anymore. I left early because I was uneasy. Although Nahal is the primary victim of my mom's actions, I don't really feel sorry for him. I simply regard him as the person who didn't care about me at all. Not remain at home. He left you in a trying moment and hasn't tried to get in touch with you in the past 6 years. He lost the privilege of being family, which must be earned. That will be. I apologize for putting you through that. It must have been really difficult and unpleasant. Well done for going to treatment and arming yourself with coping mechanisms. And notice how he presents this, that is, that he made an error and should be forgiven for discarding OP like a piece of garbage. No, and no. He witnessed you cry for him and beg for a relationship with him, and yet he blocked you out. He was and still is rightfully wounded and angry at what your mom did. He took purposeful, cold-blooded steps to make sure you couldn't get in touch with him. He didn't care how much he was harming you, and he only contacts you now when he needs something. Did he even offer an apology for his actions? Certain things are irreversible, unforgivable, and impossible to put into words, like mistakes. You are the primary victim in this situation, not them home, OP. Indeed, your mother caused him much pain, but both of them caused you great pain as well. Not remain at home. John doesn't get to act as though his actions had no repercussions, even though he had good reason to distance himself from you. As a result, he is no longer your father and you grew up without him. Stay home, don't disagree. It would have been healthy for both of them if he had given himself some space and essentially removed himself from her life. She is mature enough to know that it's complicated at the age of 14. It makes no guarantees, all it would take is for him to say, "Honey, this isn't about you. I never want you to think that I love you, but I need some time to deal with this." It affirms that it's a him problem and protects what you already had. Not remain at home. It makes sense that the affair had enraged him. But it was unacceptable that he vented his resentment on a young boy who was innocent and had no say in the situation. But the brunt of his rage has to fall on you. It's true that what your mother did to him was terrible, but it doesn't justify what she did to you. When he first met with you, his response was telling. He would have been willing to move at a speed that you felt comfortable with if he had really been concerned in your feelings and realized how wounded you were. Rather, he centered everything on himself. To make him feel better, you have to forgive him right then and there because he was trying to make up for a mistake. No, that is not how it operates. It only demonstrated how self-centered he is, just like he was when he abandoned you when you were a little girl. After my mom married when I was 24, he made it very obvious that he did not want a relationship with me or my 3 siblings. The next tale is headed, "Am I the a-hole for telling my stepsister that her father should go to a nursing home?" We were okay with this as we didn't really like for him either, and we told my mother that even though we're glad she's happy, we won't consider him family. We don't talk to him or his kids most of the time, but we remain friendly and make sure to send cards on his birthday and holidays to avoid upsetting my mother. 8 years ago, my mom's husband received a Parkinson's disease diagnosis. Even though he stayed in phase 2 during that period, he is progressively getting worse, making mistakes more frequently, and losing more of his memory. I feel awful for my mother since she is taking care of him, and it is a very terrible sight. She stated she wants to keep him at home as long as possible when my siblings and I brought up the idea of placing him in a facility that specializes in caring for persons with Parkinson's disease. We respect her decision, but we are ready to intervene right now if needed. My mom's husband fell 2 weeks ago, and as she went to help him up, he grabbed her and yanked her down, sending her flying. She shattered her hip in her fall and now needs a hip replacement. Currently in the hospital, my mother will be sent to a rehabilitation center close to her house. She will move in with my sister after she is cleared to leave the hospital. She has chosen myself and my sister as her powers of attorney and healthcare agents. Therefore, we are in charge of all of her decisions while she is in recovery. My stepsister was contacted by my brother to inform her of the fall and the hospitalization of my mother. He claimed that although he and my mom's spouse were at the house, he felt that one of them ought to come take care of him. It clarified that my mother was moving in with my sister after leaving the rehab. In essence, my stepsister told my brother that he is our problem and that she won't be attending. He told her he would contact Adult Protective Services and have him placed in a facility if that was the case. We are working to place him in a decent facility in the interim, but we want to be clear that we won't be covering the costs. My stepsister became alarmed and accused us of being callous. I'm sorry, but my mother needs to come first for the time being. It truly isn't our concern to keep her husband safe, but we are making every effort to ensure he isn't in any danger. Is it wrong of me to inform my stepsister that her father need inpatient care at their expense? Here are some remarks, not stay home. The situation should be a surprise to nobody, and yet your stepsister seems surprised. She's gonna have to step up. Stepsister, I'm not coming down, he's your problem now. Hopi's brother, well then, we're gonna call Adult Protective Services and have him placed in a care facility so he can get the help he needs. Also, stepsister, how could you? You're so heartless. Stepsister only has a heart when the situation goes her way. It's ridiculous. Being placed in a care facility is ultimately for her father's own good. If she doesn't think he is her problem, she shouldn't have a saying whether or not he gets put in a care facility. Not stay home. This man made it clear that he didn't want a relationship with you or your siblings. I assume that means having you responsible for his care would also be a no-go. As long as you aren't dumping him off under an overpass, you're doing the right thing by finding a facility for him. The rest is up to his kids. I'm German, so I have no clue about legalities in the US. Would this wife/mother be first in line to be liable for the cost of his care, or would that liability go straight to the kids? Do the mother and husband have an estate that would be used up first? Now for the last story, am I the a-hole for asking my son and daughter-in-law for a copy of the key to the new house they bought? 2 weeks ago, my son Ethan, 27, and his wife, just 30, bought a small one-story house in the town we live in. After settling down, they invited us for a small party for the occasion. We sat for dinner and talked about the house a bit. My husband Jess and I continued conversing after Ethan excused himself to take an important call. Jess showed me the original key to the house, and I asked if she made copies yet, and she said no. I said she should but also give one copy to me as well. She looked at me funny and asked why she should. I explained that it is necessary so that it could be used in emergencies. She rudely said, I don't know what kind of an emergency that would require you having a key to our house, sure won't be a fire incident. She obviously didn't seem to have any idea that a fire incident wasn't what I meant and got offended by her sarcasm. I pointed out that it's not just her decision because this is my son's house as well. She smiled at me, trying to be polite, and stated that only the ones who contributed towards the house get a copy and that I really don't need one anyway. Also assured me that my son will have the same answer for me, basically saying don't bother bringing this up with Ethan, he'll tell you the same thing. But I did, and she spoke on his behalf the entire argument, repeating what she said over and over. Things escalated to her calling me pushy, at me telling her she was being unnecessarily rude and disrespectful. My husband and I left in a rush, and I felt horrible. My husband went on and on about how paranoid and controlling I was to basically be demanding a copy of the key to the new house. But again, I stated that I was just trying to be helpful and taking extra precautions since anything could happen. But he insisted I overstepped and ruined Ethan's and Jess's joy for their new house as well as dinner. I genuinely do not think what I said was out of line, but I'm not sure why Jess reacted so intensely. I think my request was innocent. He's right, you are the a-hole. It's all about phrasing. Do people offer copies of their keys to trusted family members in case they got locked out, need their plants watered, etc.? Yes, definitely. The key word is offer, though. You said to two adults, "You'll need to give me a copy of your key, which is why you're the a-hole." And then you doubled down by continuing to push. Even if you'd said, "Hey, if you wanted us to keep a copy of the key for you for emergencies," and then left it alone, you wouldn't be the a-hole. So, phrasing and, I imagine, tone. This is exactly what I was going to say. If she had phrased it as advice and suggested that they offer a key to a close friend or neighbor in case of emergencies, then it would have been taken completely differently. She demanded a key, which makes Opie look creepy and seem like they want to look around the house while they are gone. Opie, you're the a-hole. It's all about the attitude. Things escalated to her calling me pushy, at me telling her she was being unnecessarily rude and disrespectful. Nobody's both pushy and unnecessarily rude and disrespectful of their boundaries. It's their house, she doesn't get to demand copies of the key. That was out of line. Offer in case of emergency? Yes. Demand? No. It seems like OP is really disrespectful to the daughter-in-law in general. She thinks that Ethan's call can overrule justice and that he has more say regarding the house. You're the a-hole. You sound like one of those overbearing mother-in-laws in /just no mother-in-law. You had a point about someone having a key, but that someone didn't have to be you, and you should have talked to them together. You should have dropped it once you said no. But instead, you pulled the "It's my son's house" too card and made a power play for your son in which women had listened to, which was weird and unnecessary. Then you got offended and had to make a scene. Your son is married and has a new priority now. Leave her alone. You're the a-hole.